This is a D6 Generation Pip. Bite-sized content for a busy gamer. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ.
Hey, what about me?
Oh yeah, and sometimes featuring Rafe, Hollywood Granger.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the D6 Generation. I'm here today with my daughter, Kit. How you doing, Kit?
Hello, I'm doing good.
Good. And we're going to do our thoughts on a couple games today. One, Kit and I have been playing a lot of Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I did talk about on the show not too long ago that I did get the massively awesome, the Royal Collector's Edition from Kickstarter with all the super cool components. And so Kit and I have been playing that, and I did want to share with you some of our thoughts on the rules and what we think of that game. And then a little later, we're going to talk about the brand new hotness that Kit and I just picked up, which is, of course, Disney's Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances core set. That's a long game title. We'll talk about more of that in a little bit, though. First of all, Kit, when I broke out Castles of Mad King Ludwig in that giant box, were you intimidated a little bit? Or you're like, this is complicated? What'd you think?
I wasn't intimidated by it, but that's only because you had thrown the box of the old game in my face multiple times, and every time I just refused to play it. And then finally got this new edition, and I saw the big box, and I was kind of like, well, it looks kind of cool, so I guess I'll play it.
So the components got you to the table, because you don't really ever wanted to play the old one, right?
No, I mean, the concept just didn't sound that interesting to me, and as like, if you're building a castle, it should look like a castle, so I wanted it to be cooler. But the new edition definitely stands up to what I wanted the first one to be.
Yeah, the new edition's hard to say no to. I talked about it on a prior episode not that long ago. There's all kinds of... The tiles are upgraded. The art on the tiles is much cooler. But of course, you have that really cool game board you lay out with all the towers and everything else. So it's much more... And then there's all that hard plastic that organizes everything. And as we started to... Did you think the rules were going to be complicated? Like, do you think the components made the rules look more intimidating than they were?
Not really. I feel like a lot of games we've played recently have had like the big components, like they have the towers that are like just plastic and they're painted. And so it's like, it feels less of a complicated game thing and more just like, oh, it's a cool component thing. And it's probably some easy, just like building game. That's how I associate it now. So it's not really intimidating to me.
Oh, good. And I thought what I like about it too is it's a great heads up game, like 2 players. It was a lot of fun that way as well. And I will say, after playing it quite a few times, the most intimidating part of the game is actually setup. Yeah. I think getting everything out, getting everything organized, figuring out the right counts of all the different tile types based on the player count is a little tricky. But after you get that laid out, then it goes right to gameplay, and the gameplay turns are pretty simple, right? One player starts to set up and align the... so there's some number of castle pieces. So to play this game, just for those who aren't familiar, essentially it's a tile-laying game. And what's interesting about this game is you're trying to build the interior of a castle, a palace, right? One of Mad King Ludwig's crazy palaces. And all the different rooms in the palace are different shapes. So some of them are round, some of them are rectangles, some of them are squares, some of them are sort of these weird hexagonal situations that are elongated. And as you connect them, you're going to score victory points as you connect them. And you get bonus points based on certain types of rooms being adjacent to each other or not adjacent to each other. And you want to design this thing so you have room to grow. And then there's also secondary victory conditions that are sort of randomized at the beginning of the game that are exposed to all players. And those objectives also give you bonuses for having certain types of rooms, more than other players, things like that. And then in addition, each player's got a hand of cards that are also secret objectives that give them bonus points as well. So it's essentially a victory point game based on tile layering with some bonus points at the end that are randomized, and then also some hidden objectives that each player's sitting on as well. But the turn is pretty simple, right? The first thing that happens is you just draw a set number of cards based on players to indicate what kinds of castle rooms are going to be available in the market. And then one player is the master builder, right? The master builder organizes those in certain spots in a row to dictate how much they're going to cost. And the other thing that's kind of cool is the master builder gets the money that's spent by the players to buy those pieces, right? What'd you think of the master builder rule, Kit?
I think it's pretty fun. In a 2-player game, it definitely gets kind of tricky. There'd be times where you don't have to buy anything. You get money if you don't buy. And so there'd be turns where I knew that you would be the master builder, so I would just choose not to buy anything because I didn't want to give you any money. So in 2-player games, it's less like, the Master Builder kind of matters more because you're really determined to not give your opponent any money. But if there's a bigger playing, it's like, well, other people are buying things, so I guess I should just buy things too at this point. So there's less money in the smaller games to really like. We've only played with up to 3 players, but there's like a huge difference. I'm not sure how I would do in like 4-player games. I feel like that'd be kind of
Could be hard to keep track of. I agree. I like it. I like a 2-player a lot. You're right. There's that sort of like gaming the Master Builder role, which I think is by design, honestly. 3-player got really interesting because of that pivot a little bit. But the Master Builder is not that complicated of a role. You kind of just look at your opponents, what they're doing in their castles. You look at what you want, and then you lay it out accordingly. The interesting thing, of course, is that the Master Builder buys last. So while there's that piece you may really want, if you make it cheap, your opponent could grab it first just to prevent you from getting it. So you really want to kind of design that very carefully. But once the Master Builder phase is done, gameplay is really pretty simple, right? You essentially have 2 choices as a player. You're either going to buy a part of your castle and put it in your castle, or you're going to pass and get money, right, Kit?
Yeah, it doesn't sound difficult, but then there's a lot of like overthinking that can happen about what you want to buy and what you want to have for your castle, and you want it to look cool as well as win points. So it's really
you do get into the coolness of the castle. What's your favorite aspect of like the art that makes the castle feel cool? Or just the layout?
So there's different like types of pieces for your castle, and all like the different themes for the rooms are different colors. So there's theater rooms, and those are like all red, and that's all entertainment. Or there's like sleeping rooms or like dormitories, and those are all like blue. And the sort of thing too is there's really close theming with how the rooms work. Like the theater rooms, by just having them, they're worth a lot of points because obviously theaters are cool. But if you put them next to like a dormitory, you lose points because who wants to sleep next to like a movie going off? So it's like there's really interesting, like they made the mechanics really specific to the room, so it feels really satisfying when you build things right and you don't lose points and you're just racking them up. So it's cool.
It is very satisfying to have sort of that like entertainment wing, and then having sort of the sleeping wing, and then there's a downstairs area too. Which was sort of interesting. Another part that was interesting was I didn't get all the expansions, but one of the expansions that did come in the core set was the Moats expansion, which was sort of interesting, which adds this long sort of, it's not 3-dimensional, but it's multi-layer cardstock, so it's sort of pretty cool looking, sort of moat that goes against your starting hall. And that means then that and then there's a rule. So there's some rooms that are outdoor rooms. Now in the basic game, you can put outdoor rooms next to everything else, and there's no rules. So it's like inside the courtyard, outside the courtyard, all that stuff. But as soon as you have a moat, the outdoor rooms have to go outside the moat, and it makes your building a little trickier. And then also there's bonus points for completing your moat, which is going to basically frame your castle and gives you less space to build in. What do you think of the moats, Kit? Did they add to the game? Did it make it too complicated?
I'm 50-50 on all the expansions. To be fair, we only played the moat one, but I know there's also like the weird swan one where you start getting swan tokens for things. And I looked at it and he looked at it and we're like, no, we don't want to do this. So I think the moats is like, that's the most I'd push it. And even doing that, it starts to get a little bit of just like, this is almost too much to keep track of. At least for me. I don't like to think that hard when I'm playing something. It's too much.
Well, the moats are tricky because it does prevent where you can put rooms, and so it starts to become, do you want to get the other moats going on there? But it adds a little bit of I like the moats because it does add a little bit more of the geography challenge, if that makes sense, as a frame. The other expansion Kit was talking about, the Swans expansion, is sort of interesting. You start to put these colored tokens on the rooms that are for sale, and then when you buy those rooms, you get those colored swan tokens, and by having certain sets of colored tokens at the end of the game, you score bonus points. And it's just like an extra layer of complexity that's going to slow down purchasing time.
Plus, like, the Master Builder gets to pick which type of swan token goes on each room tile.
Right.
And it's like, that's just too many layers.
So it just adds analysis paralysis. I mean, I could see it if you're a hardcore, love this game, want to add some more depth to it. I think that's too much. So we didn't go that route, though that came with our set as well. But I thought the moats were an interesting pivot, especially if you play the game a lot, maybe to give yourself a little more of a challenge. They do look super cool.
There's little fish on them.
So speaking of looking cute, another part of the game that's sort of interesting, and this was pretty funny. So when we first opened the game, there are these 8 towers, right? And they're all different plastic, 3-dimensional, full color towers, like literal little tower stands, that match certain tower rooms, because the towers is also an expansion, right? This is the expansion we actually did really like.
Oh, the towers is an expansion?
Yes. So we've only played with the towers expansion because why would you not? Giant 3-dimensional towers. So how the towers work is they're small hexagonal room tiles, just like all the other tiles, just a different shape. But when you complete a tower room, and we didn't really say how building actually works, it's super simple. So after the Master Builder sets everything up, each player goes on the table, and they can either choose not to buy anything and just get 5,000 money, or they can buy one of the rooms at the cost the Master Builder has set. And if they're not the Master Builder, they pay the Master Builder that money. And then they immediately get that room, and they must place it with an adjacent corridor to one of the other rooms that are already on the board. And then you score whatever victory points are in the corner of the room, plus any bonus points based on the icons in the room, based on if they are adjacent to other rooms that give bonus points. Now, the interesting thing is when you place a room such that it completes all the exits of a prior room, the prior room might do something special, right? And in fact, there are mechanics in the game for each type of room when you completely complete it. And complete means all of its exits have a nice clean connector, right? You can't have an exit that's blocked out. That doesn't count as completing it. When you complete it, depending on the type of a room it is, you get some sort of bonus thing. So if it's a sleeping chamber, you get one sort of thing. One of the other rooms gives you victory points when you complete it. Another room gives you maybe an extra action when you complete it type. And the tower rooms have a special completion action also, right? So when you complete a tower, what you're supposed to do is find a special coin token, which indicates another bonus victory conditions that only you can have, and you secretly look at one. You put it on that new tower thing you just finished, and then you go to the box and get out one of the cool three-dimensional towers that matches the tile and put it on top of that token to hide it, and it creates this giant three-dimensional tower in the middle of your castle, which is otherwise two-dimensional, quite frankly. What did you think of the towers? Because when we first saw them, we were like, that's overproduced, not that cool. And then about 10 minutes into the game, you were like, I must build all the towers.
I really liked them. The first game we played, I built 3 towers just because I could, and I didn't understand how victory conditions worked, but I did it anyways. And then I won, so it worked out. But I just think they look cute, and that's really what building a giant castle is all about for me, is it should look cool, and that satisfies that requirement, so...
It does. They do look cool. Each one, the exits match. They line up pretty well. The overall color of the tower matches the color of the room. So we should say all the different room categories, whether it's the entertainment room or the sleeping room or the cooking rooms and stuff. They're all a certain color. So blue, red, yellow, that kind of thing. And so the towers match that. So there's a tower for each of the main room types, which is kind of fun. So the towers, I think, it's funny. I thought they were overproduced too, but I started liking building them as well.
They're fun.
And they do kind of hide the coin, but it really, they aren't necessary.
They're supposed to hide the coin because no one else is supposed to know until the end of the game.
It looks awesome. It is
practical.
Cool. I do, yes. They look great. I do like the towers a lot. And I have to say, the victory condition things are also really cool. I think I talked about this in one episode. They're not quite poker chips, but they're like poker chips. It's cool, nice, hard, thick plastic. And each of these coins that go into the towers usually indicate like the person with the most square footage of music rooms or the person with the most towers in their castle or that kind of thing gets bonus points. When it's hidden in your tower, only you can get the points for having the most of those things. So it's kind of a sneaky way you can get more points. So the towers end up being quite a cool power. And when you start to see a lot of players get other towers, you kind of know they're on a path to potential real dominating victory. So it is one of those things where, yeah, they're overproduced, but it does add to the game. So if you remember, Kit, when we started this off, I did mention like, hey, back in the day when I first got the original Castles of Mad King Ludwig, you looked at it, you were kind of meh about it. I played it a few times with friends. I enjoyed it. And I liked the mechanics, but the components weren't anything to write home about. You never really played it with me.
I don't think I ever played it.
No, and then we got this one. We played it a few times, and then I showed you the old one again. What was your reaction?
I was like, oh, that's why I didn't play it.
Yeah, so what's our lesson here, Kit, about the right kind of component quality? It's not just for show, right? Like it actually does attract you want to play the game.
Yeah, I'm a judge a book by its cover person for everything I consume, which includes board games. So it has to
books,
look pretty. Yeah, for everything. So it has to look pretty. And I think that shows like the effort that went into the game. At least for me, it's like if they put that much effort into the art, they probably put that much effort into the rules, so it's probably good.
Yeah, I think there's something there. I mean, I think we joke in the board game community about overproduced games, and wouldn't this game could have been a lot simpler with a lot less mechanic, with a lot less components, and just the mechanics would have worked fine. True, but there is definitely some kind of feeling of the components being wonderful while you play the game.
Well, you can overdo rules. You can make too many mechanics, but personally, you can't have too many cool components physically. I could have as much plastic as they will give me.
All right, but then when we were playing the game Tapestry, let's just bring up Tapestry for a second.
Which one's Tapestry?
So Tapestry, I'm going to grab Tapestry off my shelf here.
Did I play that?
You did. So Tapestry's the one where, do you not remember Tapestry? So
No.
we played it together. So this is the one with the little, these little buildings here. Did you play with me?
Oh.
And then, but it had the towers on the side that just form a little jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
But you didn't, did you like the because it felt like the towers were overproduced for the Tetris board. Remember on the side?
Because they didn't the coolness of the little towers in Tapestry doesn't equate to what they actually do. I made so many towers in Tapestry, not for my benefit. It didn't work out. The components should look cool because they do cool things.
That's what I was trying to get to, because I knew that you were going there. So basically, we like high quality components, but having high quality components that don't do much, like a really awesome, this cool component just tells you who the current player is not as fun as a high quality component actually is
like,
about
when
victory.
They have the cool like first player tokens, I actually hate those because like I just don't understand. It's like, why did so much money go into having like this little metal coin that you pass around and be like, that's the first player token? No, put the money into something else. It could be cooler.
I agree. I actually agree with you, Kit. All right, so that was our thoughts on Castles of Mad King Ludwig, the Royal Collector's Edition. Highly recommend. Now, I guess my take on the whole overproduction debate is basically this. It's overproduced if the game is so expensive no one can afford to buy it.
Yes.
If people will afford to buy it, will buy it. Even if it's expensive, then you did the right balance of fun mechanics that line up with awesome components.
Yes, exactly.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to talk about another game, and we can debate whether or not this was overproduced. Disney's Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances Core Set. Summoner's Handbook. No, wait, that's just on the Summoner's Handbook. Not part of it.
You're listening to the D6 generation. Born to gain.
Grimdark Dungeon Master. Anyone can play the hero, but the real joy comes from playing the villain. Pesky dwarf trying to flank you? Trap him in a force cage. Archmage trying to hit you with an arcane arrow? Summon a pair of cultists and light him up with fire. Grimdark Dungeon Master, where the real hero can be a villain. Check out Grimdark Dungeon Master on www.grimdarkdungeonmaster.com or on GameFound today.
We will pass through the American patrols, past their sonar nets, and lay off their largest city, and listen to their D6 generation as we play our Russian board games.
Dice are our vice.
Check out our general gaming podcast at the D6generation.com.
All right, and we're back. Kit's laughing at me because I make these sound effects during editing. Yes, it does, Kit. So here's a little behind the curtain thing. As Craig would pick on me. So when I'm doing recording, right, we want to add a cut or edit into the podcast.
Does it need to be that aggressive, a small submarine?
I'll make these three loud noises that I won't do on the air because it'll blow out listeners' ears if they're wearing earbuds or something. But it creates three big peaks in the editing thing, so I can spot it easily,
that's
Kit,
smart.
and then go edit it.
Okay.
But I look really goofy when I'm doing it. So there you go.
I wasn't prepared.
It was not fair for me to go make three big boop, boop, boop noises in front of the thing. So, so there's a little pro tip for you there, Kit, when you start editing your own podcast.
Yeah, no.
Everybody has a podcast, Kit. You will, too.
I won't.
It's part of life now here in 2022. All right, so moving on. So we just got a brand new game, and it is the reason I was interested in this game for a couple of reasons. One, it's Disney, and Kit and I pretty much, we
all
like
the Disney games.
All the Disney. It's got a cool box. It's got a little chest,
Yeah, it's really
which is
cute.
cool. But the reason I got it was because, so we like Disney villainous, and we love the idea of having Disney villains battling each other and stuff. But the problem with Villainous is, and we do really like Villainous, we played it a lot. In fact, my brother's family has played it nonstop.
They're addicted to it.
They're addicted to Villainous. They will play Villainous at the drop of a hat. Now, Kit and I, we like Villainous. We'll play with them anytime. But it does kind of outstay its welcome.
I feel like it's like a Monopoly equivalent. It gets really, really long and just never seems to end.
And it's also you're kind of solo. I mean, you can interact with each other, but it's kind of everybody's on their own solo little mission. Every villain is so different. No one knows what the heck's going on.
They're not really balanced. We've had this issue.
They're not really
they've
balanced.
Played it so much, they can tell us, don't play them because he always wins.
So you got to kind of just be okay with this. It's just sort of a fun little afternoon thing, and it is what it is.
Don't think about it too hard.
Don't think about it too hard, and it gets you in the Disney world. Oh, that's great. But Disney came out with a brand new game, Disney's Sorcerer Arena. Now, it looks like it's based on an iOS app or something.
But it didn't really look to line up other than
except
a name,
that random Disney characters battling each other out. So it's basically a fighting game, right?
Yeah.
A one-on-one a 2-player or 4-player team. So it's head-to-head or a 4-player, two players each side team game, where the premise of this thing is each player is controlling a small squad of random Disney characters. It's not like there's...
Very random.
It's very random. So you might have like a villain from one movie paired up with a hero from another movie, paired up with... So it could be like Gaston, Sorcerer, Mickey, and Aladdin, or and they don't have to be. They don't have to be animated either. It could be like Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean. Like he's in there. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason. Much like Villainous, there's no rhyme or reason. It's not only from the A-list movies. Like one of the expansions coming out soon is the villain from Black Cauldron.
Yeah.
Of all things in there, like I was alive when Black Cauldron was made. It's kind of an interesting movie, but does anybody know what that movie is? No one knows what a Black Cauldron is. So anyway, what attracted me to this game, I'm not going to lie, was a couple of reasons. One, I do like a good Disney game. Two, its rating on Board Game Geek is quite high. And it looks like it's, when you glance at it, you think it might be a kid's game because the board is very plain. It's just sort of like a hexagonal battle board. The characters look kind of interesting because they're three-dimensional acrylic standees with full color sort of art of each of the characters on them, right? And the backs and the fronts are different, right? So Gaston's front's on one side and his back's on the other.
Which is just cute.
Which look pretty cool. And it's kind of the same thing we're doing in Grimdark Dungeon Master, that game that I've been working on.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, well, I got to check out how Disney did it. So that was also one of the reasons I got it. So, but then I was like, maybe it's going to be fun to play. So we picked it up. And it was on Amazon for pretty affordably. I think it was like $50. I think I saw it.
Plus the expansion?
And then the expansion was another $20. Okay. So for $50, you get, how many heroes do you get? I think you get, let me look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 heroes. 8 acrylic plastic standees. They all have their own unique base. And what's sort of interesting about these bases is they also have printing on them, that a base that sort of matches the character's environment, native environment, like Aladdin standing on sand, and Gaston's on a wooden board, like maybe from his tavern, and Sorcerer Mickey's sort of on like a star field kind of thing. But there's also numbers on this base, and there's little plastic rings that lock into the bases to track the character's hit points. So each of the characters has a number of hit points. Everybody's hit points are different, so you got to make sure you match the right base to the right character. And then there's a bunch of tokens as well we'll talk about in a minute. And then there's also, of course, some oversized cards with the character's stats on there. There's also a deck of cards for each character that are all their special moves. And then you've got reference cards as well. Kit, looking at the components and just what was in the box, did you think it was was it a cool looking? We just talked about Castles of Mad King Ludwig, how the second edition really called you in. Did this game call you in its components, or are you on the edge? What'd you feel about it?
I was conflicted, but I also have the issue where it's a Disney game, and so I just kind of assume that most Disney board games aren't going to be that good. Like
That's probably fair.
They produce them because like everybody wants to be Maleficent, not because you actually want a serious board game. So I was like, this looks cool, but I don't want to get my hopes up because normally it doesn't end up being as cool as it looks.
Yeah, I think the acrylic component quality was really nice. The printing is inside the acrylic, so you can't accidentally scratch the character. Like on some acrylic pieces, they put the printing on one side so you can scratch it. They didn't do that, which is great. And the acrylic's nice and sturdy. It's not that flimsy kind. The tokens are all nice quality. I think all the quality was great. The other thing cool is what do you think about the art on the cards? We debated this art on the card situation.
There's like 2 art styles, and I don't know enough about art to define what either of these art styles are, but like one has lines and one is lineless, and you can very clearly tell the difference. And it's not even by character, just by card and by move. The art style changes very aggressively, and I'm not sure if they had to switch artists midway, if this was some stylistic choice that I just don't understand, but it's kind of weird. It's off-putting to me, at least.
I agree. It's not consistent. Like, first of all, the art's all original to the game. So they didn't just take, like, Gaston, various scenes from the Beauty and the Beast movie of Gaston in it and put it in there, or even the animated show. It's original art to the game, I'm pretty sure. But, like, for example, like Sully from Monsters, Inc. is in there, and Sully does not look CGI. He almost looks like TV animation quality, or maybe even a little below that. Like it was.
But then, like Maleficent almost looks exactly like she does in her movie.
But then Maleficent and Gaston look really close.
So it's really weird. I don't know.
And then Ariel, what did they do to Ariel?
She looks like a 3D model. I don't know what happened.
She
with
looks
Ariel.
like from like the back of a cereal box. I don't even know what happened
You're
with her.
just slamming Ariel. She's fun to play with.
I don't mean to pick on her. I mean, it's just like she's got such great draw. Well, what bothers me about it is she's great hand drawn. Back of the hand drawn days, it's one of the most beautiful Disney movies ever done, and they just could have just taken that out of there and been fine. And instead, because they went for original artwork, which is cool, it's just sort of weird. And then they tried to give her shading, but then Maleficent, they didn't give her 3D shading. So it's not consistent, which is a shame because they could have.
Yeah, I don't know why it's
didn't they do that?
inconsistent. I don't.
Yeah, that's my only disappointment with the components.
Yeah,
It's not so much, it's the art. They could have been better.
Well, that and the dials.
Yeah,
I hate
yes.
the dials.
So describe what you don't like about the dials.
So there's like this, he talked about there's the base and there's the health bar on the base. And there's this little clip-on piece that is either colored red or blue depending on which side you're on. And that clips onto the base starting at the max hit points, which is 10. And then every time you want to change it, you have to unclip it and move it down. You can't just dial it down, which means every time you have to change a character's health, which is a lot because you're constantly beating each other up, you have to pick up a model, unclip the thingy, move it to the right number and put it back. And it gets really annoying. It's like there's already an entire character sheet that has all the information. Why don't you just put the health on there or add a dial on there instead of on the model?
Yeah,
it's cool in concept, doesn't work.
I have mixed feelings about this because, right, so you can almost see the game designer had this vision where he wanted everybody able to look at the table and see what everybody's health currently is, which is, I'm all for that. I think that's an awesome ability. You want to be able to glance around and see what's going on. But to Kit's point, they notch the base and notch these plastic rings. Because they're both notched, you can't just rotate the ring. You got to pick it up, twist it slightly, and then push it down to take a few points of damage. And because of this, the good news is they won't the dials won't accidentally slip on the table, so you won't forget how many people have been wounded or not. That's the good news. The bad news is it's a little bit of work, to Kit's point, to move them around a little bit. So yeah, I thought that was a little clunky. But one of the mechanics that I thought was really cool, the way the components worked, is along the side of the board, there's an initiative track, right? And each character has sort of this hourglass-shaped piece of cardboard that has their face on it. And by the way, what's really cool, too, is there's two teams in the game, right? There's always a red team fighting a blue team. And to Kit's point, those health rings are either red or blue. So by snapping those health tracker rings on the bases of the characters, you're immediately identifying which team they're going to be on. So Gaston could be playing on the red side next, Kit could be controlling him, and then the next game I could be using Gaston on the blue side, which I should have done.
You never used Gaston.
I have never
undefeated.
won a game, and Kit always picks Gaston and has always won so far. So we don't know if it's Gaston, but he's certainly... His antlers in his decorating appear to be helping his gameplay. But in any case, so what's also cool about these initiative trackers on the side, they are double-sided cardboard. As I said, they're hourglass shaped. At a glance, you can tell the max health of a character and also the victory points you get for slaying that character.
So nice.
So in this game, the way you win is by victory points, and you score victory points in two different ways. The primary way is taking out opponents' characters, and they are all worth different victory points because some are harder to kill than others because they have different hit points and toughness, all kinds of strength things. But also what's cool about these initiative trackers is they're double-sided. One side's got red, one side's blue. So the initiative trackers can also be designed so you can tell which character is controlling which player is controlling which character as well. But what's really sick about these things, because they're sort of this hourglass shape, there are these status effect abilities. Like you can get immobilized, you can get shrunken, some of them are positive. You could be stealthy, you could be strong, you could be tough, right? And these abilities all slide in and sort of connect into the initiative tracker. So by glancing at the initiative tracker, you can immediately tell all the different statuses that are on a character. So to Kit's point earlier, since you're going to be glancing at the initiative tracker anyway to see what statuses are on everybody,
They could have put the health tracker
you could have put the
right
health
there.
thing over there too, and we'd all would have been fine. And have been glancing at the board, and all the players would have been able to see it easily. So, but I like the coolness idea of the ring. It just didn't come out that way. It's almost like you could imagine the game designer had this really cool idea, and then in production execution, it kind of got lost in the shuffle. But in any case, all right. So, how does the game play? How does the game work? Well, what's interesting is how the rulebook's organized. So it's organized into chapters, and there's so much depth to this game. This is what things that surprised Kit and I, because we were ready for a game designed for 12-year-old Disney fans, right? Or parents to play with their kids, maybe a little bit of depth to it, but there's a lot going on here. Like, this is actually, what did you think? Did you feel like it was a gamer game at the end, Kit?
Yeah, I feel like it is. There needs to be a slightly bigger roster, but it's Disney, so there'll be more characters soon.
Yeah, there's already, so for roster, let me just tell everybody the components here. So, and here's where it gets a little pricey too. So the core set's $50, which I feel like doesn't feel too bad. As I mentioned, you get Sorcerer Mickey, his little sorcerer hat. You get Gaston, you get Maleficent, you get Aladdin, you get Demona from the villain from Gargoyles, people.
I didn't know who that was.
Kit's too young to know Gargoyles. I love Gargoyles. Demona's awesome. Her cards, she's all these really cool moves. She can pull all of her technology out, bazookas, pistols. She's pretty sweet. Ariel, of course. Dr. Facilier, Kit, what's he from?
Tiana.
Yes, Princess and a Frog, right? And one of Kit's favorite movies of all time. And, of course, Sully from Monsters, Inc. But then we also got one of the expansions is already out, which introduces 3 more characters. So in the expansion, you just get 3 more characters.
And it's $20 for 3
It's
characters.
$20 for 3.
Lot.
So here's where they're going to get you, right? So for the first expansion, you get Moana. You get Stitch and Davy Jones, right? And then also that expansion's interesting. You see where they're going here. It adds tiles that are cardboard tiles that are water. So in the core game, the whole board is just it's a hexagonal boring board. But the first expansion already adds the ability to put terrain on the table periodically based on abilities of characters. My guess is the next expansion, which I have to go look up, I forget who's in there, maybe it's going to produce different kinds of terrain. So that could be kind of cool. So we're adding a little more depth to the game.
It's kind of like, you can tell they intentionally set it up that way too, because if you look at like your character cards, each character has like their groupings. So there's like the oceanic characters, and those characters are allowed to use the water tiles. And there's also a ton of other groupings that do not come up in the base game. Everyone's grouped as villains or heroes. There's some characters that are kingdom characters, and there's no reason for that stat to be there unless it's expansion stuff, because it doesn't come up in the base game.
Right. So clearly they're going to be adding more depth to this. But to Kit's point, there's lots of keywords on there that don't seem to mean much. Like princess is on half, obviously all the princess characters, for example. Will that matter someday? I don't know. But it's pretty cool. So in any case, one of the things that was interesting was because the game has so much depth in it, the rule book is organized in a way by chapters, with each chapter introducing more and more complexity. So the first chapter, you play the game with fixed essentially sides, fixed characters on each side. Then the next chapter teaches you how to draft characters, because every time you're going to play with different characters depending on who you've got access to in your household. And then the next chapter introduces the character cards. So there's actually these little mats that have special rules for each character. That gets introduced. And then the final chapter introduces the ability to upgrade your character. So your character can actually sort of, it's not really gaining experience points, but it's kind of like that. And you can flip your character's card over to give them even more abilities. So as you play, the game does sort of ease you into rules complexity, which is also pretty nice. If you're in a house with younger players, maybe you never move past one of the level complexities as well. But as your kids grow up, there's a lot of complexity there. So I thought it was pretty interesting. Kit, what'd you think about sort of like the setup and the drafting mechanics and how you built your side? Was that sort of neat?
I like building teams. I think they need to, it feels like there's almost character archetypes. There's almost tanks, there's almost DPS, and there's almost healers. Not quite, but almost. And it feels like you kind of screw yourself unless you kind of organize your team around having those three aspects, but they don't really tell you that. So I think if they're already bothering to group these characters so far down with these little subtitles, just add a little subtitle, like by Gaston, put that he's a tank, put that for Sully, and then and you know Maleficent's gonna be like DPS. So like, it feels like that's there, they just don't tell you. It's like, that could be a nice thing for when you're drafting, especially for little kids who don't know what anything means, and then it's like, oh, I get one of these, I get one of these, and you gotta
some of it's not intuitive. So like, the tanks are easy to spot because one of the things that is obvious on the turn, the initiative tracker, is the total health of the character. So like, Sully's got 11 total health, which is the most in the game. Gaston has 10, which is also a lot. Most folks are hovering around like 7 or 8. So by glancing at Sully and Gaston, you can kind of tell they're tankish, right? But then you have things like Ariel's a healer.
And Moana's a healer, so I guess ocean characters are kind of healers, kind of, sort of.
But then you have Aladdin, who's highly mobile and hits hard and runs. And then you have Moana, who's highly mobile also and hits pretty hard, has a little bit of healing. So like, you're going to have to just play and learn, because there's no way. And the interesting thing is the characters feel like they're characters, right?
They do, but like, I'm not comfortable to say that they're all balanced. I feel like if you did this long enough, you'd start to see that certain characters are way better than others. Like, Ariel is the only hardcore healer, I think, at all. So that's kind of interesting. There's some people are just completely different, and people it's like, well, you could easily replace Sully or Gaston. Like, you can switch them out pretty interchangeably. So it's like, I'm not sure I like how they design the characters. It feels like they're very true to their core games, but might not be like great for the mechanics of like the board game.
Yeah, they're interesting because like, they all have it reminds me a little bit, I mean, it's nothing like Villainous, except that there's, some of the guys have their own little mechanics that get sort of interesting, that are different than everybody else's. So for example, Sorcerer Mickey can actually get the broom status, where you attach a broom to him. And now the way statuses work, right? So when you get a status, so it'll be a card. So let's say, there might be a card that says do 2 damage to an adjacent rival, and then inflict 2 immobilized on that rival. So what that means is you put the immobilized symbol or the immobilized status, in the little slot of the initiative tracker of the guy you just hit. And the 2 means you put 2 tokens on top of the immobilized. And what happens at the start of your turn every round, you're going to remove this top token for any status effects you have. And when the tokens all go to 0, the status effects go away. But of course, if you take the same status effect again, whatever the number is, it gets added back to that stat, right? So those status effects can kind of stack and keep going. Most of the status effects are kind of bad. Some of them are good, though, like tough and stealthy and strong. But then Mickey's Magic Broom one's really interesting. It kind of represents his magical power that's building up inside of him. And the more tokens he had, a lot of his cards do damage, and his speed is based on how many tokens are on his broom. So Mickey's whole job is to kind of jack that up, and he can do some really interesting combos. Other characters don't care about that at all. And what was interesting about Davy Jones and his curse kit?
David Jones is like a weird glass cannon where he curses everybody around him, including himself, which is fitting from the movies. And then everybody just dies. It's a giant bloodbath when he gets in the middle. But he was really fun to play with. But I think the hard part with the status effects is there is no cheat sheet card that every player gets with the status effect stuff. And especially when they're releasing expansions with 3 more characters and 3 new status effects, if you don't have a cheat sheet, it's really annoying to have to go onto the back of each rulebook and be like, oh crap, what does that do?
Yeah, that is the thing. So yeah, one thing, just to put a bow on Davy Jones, what's interesting about him is, so Davy Jones has this ability to curse like everybody, including his own people. I'm like, well, Kit, why are you cursing your own people? And then he did an attack that's like damage equal to the number of cursed characters on the table.
And you curse half the characters on the table, it's like 6 damage.
So Davy Jones kind of sets up the curse. But what's interesting, to Kit's point, like all the status effects are on the back of the core rulebook. So if you ever buy the core game, everything's set up pretty well. The reference is on the back, you know what's going on. As soon as you start getting expansions, now you got to start remembering, was that status effect from the expansion? Because it got Stitch introduces no punchbacks, which is a status effect. Kind of cool. But to get Stitch, now you got to go look at the rulebook that came with the game with Stitch in it, for example. So,
and if you're doing a 4-player game, it's kind of a lot for everybody to be able to see all that. You have to pass those down all the time. That just gets annoying.
Yep. But what I do like about the game is it's relatively simple to play. So the drafting mechanics are pretty simple. Player 1 picks 1 character from the pool of characters you have. The next player picks 2. And then the player 1 picks 2 more, and then the second player picks the last one. So they've got it set up in there a little bit to try to give first pick has a slight weakness because second pick gets 2, which works pretty well. Once you've drafted, you set up that initiative tracker on the side, which is a pretty straightforward process. You kind of just sort of secretly stack your characters in the order you want. You both reveal the top one, who's got the lowest initiative stat, which is built right on the tracker, gets first, and you just alternate placing your characters. And then you start to play. And gameplay is really pretty simple. During your turn, you basically draw a card. First of all, you check for all statuses on your character. If there's any statuses, you remove a token from each status. That's how they eventually, burn out. After that, you draw a card out to your hand. And then after that, you're going to take that character and you're going to do a move action with him, which can either be just move a base speed of 2 or play a movement card that matches that character to give him a special move. For example, Demona has a card that's called Flight, and she can literally use her wings to go anywhere on the board. Pretty awesome. But then also, you get an action, basically an attack action, and that action, it's not always attack though. So you get an action also, and the action can be a basic attack, which is 2 points of damage, or you can play an action card, again, that matches that character. Now, we should say what's sort of interesting about this game, too, is each character has their own deck of cards, but at the start of the game, you take the deck of each of the characters that are on your team, and you shuffle them all together, and then you deal yourself a hand, right? And so you might be sitting on a hand that has a little bit of all your characters, but you might be sitting on a hand that's kind of hand locked with one of your characters, not your other characters. But it's kind of nice they got a mechanic in there where you can burn any movement card or any action card to boost your speed by 1 or boost your attack damage by 1. Kit, what do you think of the basic phases, the basic mechanics of just moving around and attacking people?
It works pretty well. I like that you can discard cards to just add +1 because it's so nice. That way you don't get hand locked, because I had a game where I was just had Maleficent cards for half the game, but you still have 2 other characters you need to move around the board. So being willing to discard cards and do that is really nice. There's a weird mechanic, which I think, again, this is going to be an expansion thing, where you discard cards and you also banish cards, which is they're removed from that entire game. But I've never found a way to get where you go to your discard pile at all, so I'm not really sure what the difference is.
I had one character that could pull cards back from the discard pile.
Really? Who?
Yeah, I forget who it was. It might have been Mickey. There's one character that can pull cards back from the discard pile. So my guess is there'll be more eventually that could do that, yeah.
Because I thought that was the only mechanic where I was I don't know why this is here. But everything else made a lot of sense, really easy to get. And you could see that there's depth, but it's if you don't want to deal with it, you don't have to.
The other thing interesting too is there's no hero elimination. So when one of your characters gets to 0 hit points, your opponent scores the victory points for that hero, and then that hero comes off the board. but then that hero's next activation, you just respawn them back on the edge of the board near your side. So they just kind of come back into the game ready to rock again. But you don't want to die too often because you're going to give up a lot of victory points. Now, the only other way to get victory points in the game, in addition to killing each other, is there are 3 sort of objective hexes right in the center of the board. And at the start of a character's activation, if they're on one of those, you also score a victory point. And in the full game, if you're using all the rules in the game, 20 victory points wins. And most characters are between, 5 and...
7's the highest, and I think that's only Sully.
Yeah, right now, I think so. I think everybody else is 5 or 6.
5 or 6. And it feels very random. I can't figure out how they chose who gets 5 and who gets 6.
Yeah, well, it does seem like the larger victory points are related to the larger health scores.
But Aladdin's worth 6 and Gaston's worth 6.
But Aladdin's worth 6. But Aladdin has healing.
Oh,
so I wonder if you do them right, I don't know how to play them. Right. So I wonder. So I think with a veteran player, because you're right, Kid, it looks a little weird, but I think there's some veteran abilities you can do. Like Aladdin can get stealthy, makes him harder to hit. Sully can get tough, which might be why he's a little more victory points than Gaston. I'm not sure. But it's interesting. More hit point than Gaston. Yeah, what's that?
He has one more hit point.
Yeah, he does have one more hit point also. So there's the movement phase, there's the action phase, and there's one other phase when you get to the advanced rules, or I guess chapter 4, which is the skill phase. Oh. So each hero also has this card in front of them, in addition to their your cards in your deck in your hand, and this card gives you a bunch of basic information about your hero. What's also interesting is those cards indicate how many cards that particular hero contributes to your hand. So when you're playing with all the rules, your hand size isn't always the same. It's your max hand size is based on a sum of some stats and on each of your characters. So hand size is typically 6 in this game, but
mine's been 5 both times. I keep thinking Gaston.
Well, we think Gaston's a little OP, but and maybe the game designers built this in. He only contributes 1 card to your hand. Most characters contribute 2. So if you're playing with Gaston, you're probably going to have a hand size of 5 instead of 6, which definitely is something you got to overcome. So that's sort of interesting mechanic. So you get your skill on your card, and these skills are pretty neat. Some of them, like Aladdin, can burn a card to get stealthy, which requires your opponent to burn cards to even see Aladdin to hit him from range, which is kind of interesting. Which is kind of neat. What are some of the other skills you can remember, Kit, that you may have used?
Oh, Moana gets to place a water tile, which basically gives her extra movement.
Yep.
Maleficent has one where she gets to draw cards based on the number of people she's hit this turn, assuming she's on one of the cool little golden point earning tiles. And Gaston, if you flip over the top card on your pile, if it's an attack card, then he gets a strength token.
Nice. Yes, they're really pretty cool, and they do capture sort of the essence of the characters there. And then the last thing, we just played this for the first time. I think we played 4 games now, right?
We did the whole tutorial, so that's 4.
4. And then the last one we played was the one that allowed you to, the last set of mechanics. And I can't decide if this is cool or just extra. But characters can also be upgraded. And the way this works is on your character's card, your character's little mat card, the big one, it has a series of little icons that if you have the right combination of those, you can upgrade your character. Where those come from is you look in your discard pile, and in the lower right-hand corner of all your cards are these matching little icons. And if you get the right combination of those in your discard pile, you can, what Kit described as banishing, you take those cards out of your discard pile and remove them from the game, and that allows you to take your character's mat and flip it over to the other side, which gives your character one other power. What did you think of this, Kit? Was it just extra stuff to keep track of, or did you think it was cool?
I like upgrades, but I'm not a fan of anything where I have to keep track of the stuff specifically in my discard pile. Right. I don't, you have to, basically what happens is you end up organizing your entire discard pile to see what the little symbol is on the bottom corners. And I like the upgrades. I thought it was kind of cool, but I don't like having to also keep track of what's in my discard pile. I didn't care what I was putting in there, but I was like, oh shoot, I gotta see if I have these things in here. Hold on, give me a minute. So it's just kind of I don't really love that. But the upgrades themselves are kind of cool. And again, they're really on point for the characters.
They were. I liked the idea of the upgrades. Some of the upgrades just give the character a little more power. Some of the upgrades, like Demona's upgrade, whenever she discards 2 cards in her own turn, you get 2 victory points and her card goes back to the unupgraded side. So you can basically keep upgrading Demona and earning free victory points by doing specific actions. There's a couple of the characters that are like that will flip back to their unupgraded side and do some sort of mini feat kind of thing, which is sort of interesting. But to Kit's point, it does slow the game down because now you're trying to organize your discard pile by types of these sort of icons, so you can kind of quickly at a glance see if you're ready to upgrade. And And then it does add another depth to the game because when you're choosing the right combinations of characters, different characters have different kinds of those icons in their deck. And so if you really want to get hardcore about this, you want to create the synergies where the characters you choose have the right combinations of icons that also lead to the right kind of upgrades so you can upgrade more efficiently if you want to get to that level of play. So there's a lot of depth in this silly little Disney combat game. There's a lot going on here. That makes it pretty interesting. So you basically, that's pretty much all the rules. So you're gonna get those three actions: the move action, the attack action, the skill action, and you're gonna duke it out until you've done enough damage to your opponent, or killed your opponent enough times to get enough victory points, to get to 20 victory points. And then as soon as one of those players makes 20 victory points, you declare a winner. Kit, what was your feeling of the game? Like, did you feel like there was a lot of interest there? Do you want to play it again?
I like it. I want to play it again. I think it's, like, in terms of Disney games, I like it better than Villainous. But I also like 1v1 games more, because there's a lot of strategy. It's like Disney-themed chess. But,
it's a little bit Disney-themed chess.
It's pretty fun. I think it might eventually kind of get, like, just stale because there's not a lot of characters, and the board's not that cool. So, like, there's a ton of, like, each character does basically one cool thing that's, like, them. But there's only, like, 8 characters or whatever, so you're going to pretty quickly figure everybody out. And then it's kind of like, well, what now? So they're going to release more, but eventually it's like, well, how many of these games do I want to buy? It's so many.
It is pricey for it. I think it's on the bubble. I like it a lot. I think it's actually quite fun. So Kit, you got to rate it on the scale on the D6G rating system. So we're going to do the
you told me
quick.
This before and I forgot.
I know. So here's how the D6G rating system works. So it's the % chance on a D6 that the average gamer will enjoy it. So, for example, if you give this a 4+, it means half the people who roll a dice that like this game would enjoy it. If you gave it a 2+, it means most people who try it would enjoy it. And you can also come up with qualifiers. So, for example, you can say, well, young kids might enjoy it on a 2+, where adults might only enjoy it on a 5+. So, what do you think, Kit? What do you think your chance of people enjoying this particular game? And that'll rate it myself.
I think 2+. And if you're if you're the one bringing the game and you know the people you're playing with, you could choose the level you want to go to because the tutorial breaks up into chapters. You could know the people you're playing with, like a really serious game, and go up to the craziness and upgrade your characters, or you could scale it down and be like, you know what, we're just not gonna do that. And that kind of gives you options. I think most people could get into this or could like it. I think it could be fun.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point about the. You can choose the level of complexity as you want. So you can just play without the upgrades and it still plays great. You can play without the player mats and it still plays great and keeps it really simple. I agree. I hope some expansions introduce new boards or more tiles so that the board can change.
Yeah.
And I would like to see, I feel like a library of 20 characters would be kind of awesome.
Sweet. 20?
But I'm thinking about the price point of that. At the current rate of release,
it's like
that could be like $150 worth of Disney game. Now, as a miniature gamer, I can't really balk at that, but that's still a lot of stuff. Now, they are great acrylics.
Well, that's just $20
and I wish the art was better.
For acrylics and cards.
So it's hard. It's hard. We don't have 3-dimensional towers that we were talking about earlier, but I'm going to give it. So here's what I would say. I would say for the average gamer, just random dude off the street, doesn't know much about Disney, I would give it a 4+ for the average gamer because there's so many great heads-up combat games out there. However, if they are a Disney fan, I would give this 2+ with a reroll. Meaning that most people who are Disney, this is probably one of the more solid Disney games out there. If it captures, if you imagine in a mind a Disney world where these people beat each other up. Because let me tell you something, it is extremely satisfying because what we were picking on the art earlier, but I will say the visual. So Moana's got this move where it's called whack someone with an oar, and the art is her whacking someone with an oar. And if she moves 4 spaces, does extra damage, and you just set up that oar whack.
It's so fun.
The players just make the gesture. It's just you just have this great visual of Moana running up behind Gaston, just like whack with an oar. So I have to say that stuff's pretty fun. And then getting Mickey going with his brooms and everything. Like there's a lot. Maleficent was like breathing fire or something.
She turns into a dragon. It's
of
pretty
course she
sweet.
does, because Maleficent,
Yeah.
right? So like, there's a lot there. So if you're a Disney fan, there's a lot to like here. I mean, as far as like smash up combat games go, there's a lot to like about this in the Disney realm. So yeah, I'd say if you're a Disney fan, this is pretty much a must buy to put in your Disney game collection. But if you're just a gamer that like has a passing interest in Disney but want to see what's up with Brawlers, it's probably worth checking out. I'd say $50 for the core set.
That's not bad.
Is not bad. Where it's gonna start to get pricey is when you're starting to add up all the expansions, and especially if you can find it at a game store on on sale at some point or something, I would definitely pick this up.
eBay it and get 5 expansions with
there's
it.
there's a lot of depth here. Don't be fooled by the Mickey Mouse logo. There's a lot of depth in this game. So there you have it. That is, Kit, how do you say this title?
Disney Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliance's Core Set Summoner's Handbook.
Well, doesn't need the handbook. There you have it. That's our review of Disney's Sorcerer's Arena Epic Alliances. That kind of applies to be a different one that's not Epic Alliances.
That's not epic.
Maybe there'll be subpar alliances. Legendary alliances. Oh, Mother Gothel's coming in the expansion too. So Mother Gothel
Jack
and
Skellington?
that's who it is. Jack Skellington, Mother Gothel, and the
Black
horn
Cauldron person.
the horned one, I think his name is from the Black Cauldron.
Is that literally his name?
I think, yeah, he's got like horn. I think it's something like the horn one. The Black Cauldron had issues, Kat. I'm not going to lie. But it's kind of a cool movie. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Join us next time on the D6 Generation.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@the d6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.